Principal Matters Podcast, episode 477. Hi, Principal Matters listeners. This is Will Parker, back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another Principal Matters. Jen, this week's guest is not only just an amazing principal of a high school in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, he's also a dear friend and has allowed me to sit with him and do coaching and walk his school. Beau Brannon is going to be our guest this week. But before we jump into that episode, we like to do a quick Q&A. And so this week's Q&A is, what are some common pitfalls that keep principals from effectively leading instructional communities? And this could be your next book.
Right. Well, I've thought so much about this, and as you were reading the question, I thought, how obnoxious would it be if I answered with, well, how long do you have? Because there are so many pitfalls that keep principals from this instructional leadership piece. And I've actually I've presented to a couple of districts on this, and I'm doing some work with ASCD on this. You know, we all walk around the world, us leaders, and we know that our job is instructional leadership, and we sometimes can't get to it, and it's maddening, right? Like, so for a principal, they're going to say discipline, special education, parents, events, facilities. Like, there's so many things that get in the way. And my answer is not going to be the obnoxious, well, find time, because that's not helpful and not really possible. So I do think there's some tricks, but Will, I want to make sure you have a chance for your thoughts.
Well, it is funny because a question like this could take us a long time, because I'm already thinking of other resources. I remember when Jimmy Costas did a piece a few years ago, and I can't remember the complete title, but the basic gist of it was stop it. Like, here's just like things that you're doing that you should just stop it, because if you want to be an effective instructional leader, then these are some things to stop. And then I'm thinking of my good friend Mark Schellinger, who's been a guest on our show and will be again, who just has devoted the last 18 years to the research that goes into why principals don't get to do the things they want to do. Mm-hmm. And then just the basic principles he's helped leaders adapt that help them train people to treat them like they want to be treated, to help them create the protocols. So, Jen, I don't want to take a really hard question like this and try to like fit everybody into one mold.
Right.
But I'll say a few things, common pitfalls, because these were mine. Allowing the urgent to take over the important. And I know that's something everybody's heard that said at some point if they've been in leadership long enough, but it's true. If I have not scheduled in advance the things that are the most important to me, the urgent will drown out everything I intended and wanted to really be doing that day at school. And so one of the pitfalls that I see leaders doing is, stepping in with their cape, ready to put out the fires and save the world, but ignoring that, creating the agendas and the priorities and the schedules of the things where they know they're going to make the most impact, and then leaning into those, even with the fires, being able to lean back into those things where you know you're going to make the most impact with students and teachers. So I'll start there.
You know what, when you were talking, it reminds me of, I think it was just last week, you talked about the time that your administrative assistant, you told her, I got to get some things done, handle what you can. And she handled like 6 urgent things. And she said to you, this is what they needed, this is what I did, and there's no follow-up needed. Mm-hmm. To me, that's urgent while you were doing the important. And so to that, I would say many times urgency, people go to the principal. You know, I need my principal to help me solve this, but there might be other people. You know, the administrative assistant, gosh, I had some wonderful administrative assistants, and I would joke, they're running the place, ask them. But it was really true. They could do the urgent while I did the important.
Yeah, I was talking to a leader the other day. I think she's in her 20th year serving in this building, and she was talking about the enormous amount of guilt she feels when she needs to do something that's going to be self-development or maybe just catching up. And I just sometimes I'm just saying things as reminders to leaders, because you may be this person too. But I was telling her, your school needs you Yes. But your school also needs to know what it feels like to be able to run without you.
Right.
And when you've been there as long as you have, it should be a badge of honor for you to take a step back and go, I built this.
Right.
They got it. They got it. And I don't need to feel guilty by watching them do the thing that we've spent so long
Right.
building and creating and designing for them to do.
That's right.
For that first year leader, that may not be a feeling you get.
Right.
Okay, but and it may not even be the feeling you get by your fourth or fifth year, but over time, it's you. Sorry, Jen, you and I both grew up on farms, so when I think about the people that I admire in those communities, it's usually those that have done it for decades, that have built the ecosystem for knowing when this needs attention, when this needs
Right.
attention, and it does not happen overnight.
Well, and I know we're going a little long, so just one more. I remember when I was a little girl, the weather would really upset my dad. It would really upset him because he had hay down and it rained and what was now it rains. He's like, well, it'll be all right, and that's because he's been doing it 53 years, and he knows there's a lot you can't control. And so I think when we apply that to the principalship, nothing's ever going to be smooth and problem free, but with time you get a little bit more relaxed and you do have more faith in the powers that be that it will be okay.
Yeah. Well, this is the perfect segue for this week's guest because Beau Brannon is one of those leaders who you'll hear me have this conversation with Beau, but even since this recording, I've been able to go down and just walk his building with him and see him in person, practicing the very things we're talking about, Jen, and leading a really large school community towards improvement, towards and high teacher retention and great student outcomes. And so, Principal Matters listeners, if you have questions that you'd like Jen and I to respond to, feel free to email us. Jen, how can our listeners reach you?
Absolutely. Find me at jenschwanke.com.
And you can always email me at will@williamdparker.com and find our resources in this post there. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation with Beau Brannon. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but how do you actually get the right results and know the best next steps? The secret is iExcel. iExcel helps you easily assess performance and determines the best path forward for each student. Whether you need data for benchmarking or intervention planning, iExcel can do it all. And iExcel doesn't stop at assessments. It also provides you with everything else your school needs, from a standards-aligned K-12 curriculum to actionable analytics. iExcel's online learning and teaching platform is research proven to improve student outcomes, and it's used by 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts. If you want to start driving real progress, get started today at iexcel.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Principal Matters Podcast, episode 477. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, I'm talking to my friend, Beau Brannon, who's Beau, you're a repeat guest. We're going to be talking about lessons from transition. Beau Brannon is the principal of Union High School in Tulsa, Oklahoma, previously led Union's freshman academy as both assistant principal and principal, a Muldrow High School graduate and former college football player at the University of Tulsa. He followed his passion for education and has degrees from the University of Arkansas Fort Smith, Arkansas State, Northeastern State University. Man, you're a busy guy. He began his teaching career in science and football coaching at Alma Public Schools, and later was the teacher of the year at Keys High School in 2015. And since joining Union Public Schools, he's taught geometry, helped coach a state championship football team, and served in school administration since, around 2018, I think, Beau. You and your wife, Caitlyn, have been married since 2013 and are the proud parents of two children, Baker and Collins. Man, welcome back, Beau, to the Principal Matters Podcast. We're recording this. I'm just going to be straight up with leaders in the summer, right before teachers are coming back. We won't even get to release this until like December. But you're like, you were telling me before we even started recording the craziness of sending out the master schedule to 170 plus teachers and getting ready for kids and selling a house and all that kind of stuff. So, welcome back, my friend. What else can you tell listeners as an update from the last time they may have met you?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on. You've been a great friend and mentor to me now for the better half of a decade, I would say. So it's just an honor. You've been such a great resource to me and so many others. So it truly is an honor. And I just want to thank you too for having me on here again. Things that people don't know about me, I don't know. I had to ask my wife. I feel like I'm a pretty open book. Like, what do people not know about me? And she said that I love my wife and kids slightly more than my dog.
Yeah.
So I do love. I have a golden doodle that runs with me every morning. She's my buddy, and then I'm still an avid runner, as I just mentioned. And then sometimes, when I'm out outside of this professional setting with ties and jackets, and I'm wearing a tank top or something, sometimes people are surprised to know that I have a few tattoos. So that surprises people.
Oh, that would surprise me. So I guess I didn't know that, but I also didn't know about your golden doodle. So what's your golden doodle's name?
Her name is Chloe. And she's an athletic dog. We have some fun runs together.
Well, I run with my dog Ivy. Not as much as I used to, just because Ivy's part husky and she loves to pull no matter how long we've been running together. And sometimes I just get tired of it, Beau.
Yep, they're fun and they're work. But they're fun.
Oh, they are. So, but she at least gets to walk with me every day if we don't run together every day. So man, okay, I want to set the stage for this conversation. First of all, thank you for your friendship too, because when I think back to a decade of you interacting with the content that's come from this podcast, and even today, as I was going back through your bio, getting ready for this conversation, I was like, man, you know what, Beau, you actually stepped like into education when I was stepping into when I had already been an admin for a while. And then by the time you're stepping into administration, I'm kind of leaving that world to support educators full time. And it's humbling on my side to just be able to circle back and sit down with you regularly or go to lunch with you, because we know each other personally too, and hear you doing the work, and to realize like, man, my friend Beau and so many of my other friends that are doing the work really, really well. And it just makes me feel like there's something so rewarding for me to be able to know that I can still be a part of watching school leadership being done in a way where teachers and kids are being taken care of so beautifully. And I wanted to start there because sometimes I'll be on plane rides or I'll be meeting people for the first time. They'll ask me what I do, and I tell them I work in schools. I'm a former principal. And sometimes they'll say things like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I'll be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. I understand there's a lot of like challenges in schools, but have you met my friend Beau Brannon from Tulsa? Have you met my friend? And I'll just start filling in the blank on people that I personally know whose work is making schools such a great place for kids. So I wanted to begin there, first of all, just to give you those accolades. But I also wanted to bring you back into this conversation because I talk to a lot of leaders that are transitioning in their roles, and you've just finished a whole year of transition. And I thought it would be great to share some of those lessons with leaders, even if they're listening to this in the middle of a school year. So can you talk a little bit about some of the outcomes and update listeners a little bit on the transition that you experienced, and then some of the outcomes you've experienced through that transition over the last year?
Yeah, a lot of ways, as you mentioned, I've been a principal at the Freshman Academy, 4 years as assistant, 2 years as a head principal. And so I think in a lot of ways, it was just a matter of building upon what I've already learned and those lessons I've already learned from you and so many others. And then just trying to scale them in a larger school. When you make that jump from ninth grade to a high school, or if you're at a smaller school and you're going to a bigger high school, just like how do you scale those things and implement what you already know that works, and then going in there and protecting some of those sacred cows and traditions that you learn along the way. You want to try to keep your mouth shut for a little while and just listen for a little while. And so I think that those are really important things that I've tried to go through in my transition, and I could share a lot more as we go through here, and some of the other questions that I think you'll have for me. I'll be able to jump a little bit more into that, but I think that's the main thing for sure.
Well, I do want to talk about some specifics, because I know from the time that you and I have spent together that you are what I would call a heart and a smart guy. You care very deeply about the academic student outcomes that are happening. I call that the smarts part of school. But you care really deeply about the hearts of people too, the culture, the trust part. So talk to me a little bit about that. What are some of the outcomes you've been able to see, and why do you think you've seen some of these outcomes on both the culture side and on the student outcome side?
Well, I would say you're right. I do care a lot, but I still have so much to learn. I still feel like I'm a pretty young into this profession, and I have a long ways to go in terms of knowledge. But you won't find somebody who cares more. And I try to keep that mentality at the forefront. And some of these days, when I learn and get some experience, I think I might be dangerous. So, but I'll start here. You asked for some data, and I always like to say, without data, you're just a guy with an opinion. And so. Each year, to build culture and trust is important. I think that's where it starts, at the top with your administrative team and then with your staff. And so each spring we partner with OU, and we give a survey to our staff, students, parents, and amongst our staff, we had a 25% increase in faculty trust in principal from just 3 years ago to now. And then just within the last year, a 10% increase in faculty trust and principal. And so what are those indicators within that grouping? We had a little over 96% of the staff agreed that the principal at this school develops a team attitude and spirit amongst faculty and staff. 94% agreed that the principal at this school commends them when they do a better than average job. And then a little over 98% of them agree that the administrative team here cares about them as a person. Mm-hmm. And to me, those numbers, they really validate the work that we're doing here with our staff. And I can talk about some of the ways that we've done that here later on. But how does that translate to students? And I think that when you start building that trust in them, they buy into your mission and your heart for kids. And so then that's going to translate to the kids. And so some of the outcomes we've had in terms of student performance, we had a little over 32% decrease in the number of failed courses in the first semester, fall compared to the next fall, and a 21% decrease in the failed courses of semester 2, which translates to about almost 1,300 courses that will not have to be recovered. And so you think, well, with 1,300 fewer failed courses, you probably didn't recover as many through the credit recovery process. And that's also not true. We had a 32% increase in the number of failed courses that we had recovered, up 360 courses. And so, about 1,650 fewer courses had to be recovered this summer because of the work that we've done. And how does that translate to students? Because that's where it matters, right? It is our graduation goals. And so we had 211 less students fail a course the first semester, and 187 less students fail a course in semester 2. First year.
And I want to put that in context, because you have a school with approximately 3,500?
3,500, yes, sir.
So you're talking an enormous campus in this case. And when you see a decrease of students that are, because you and I both know this, Beau, especially those 9th and 10th grade years, but it still happens with those 11th to 12th graders too, that credits are everything when it comes to advancement. And so, and I'm not saying anything new to high school people, but it's just such a good reminder sometimes to recognize that anytime a kid is suddenly missing that credit, then their chances of advancement become more difficult. The chances of dropout increase, their chances of missing schools starting, all those things begin to go up when they lose that hope. And you guys significantly, not to mention all of the increases you saw in trust, but you also significantly decrease failure. Talk about, let's get nitty gritty. Why do you think that happened? Because that is 32% decrease in failing courses among kids across that entire campus, which means you have way more success happening than you have failure. Talk about that.
Man, that's a really loaded question. There's a lot of things. I think number one, it starts at the hiring table. And last year, when I came over here and took this position, there were a lot of openings. And so at the interview table, you have to be really conscious of who you're hiring, and that you're making sure that you're finding people with the heart to give kids a pathway to success, not give them a grade, but give them a pathway to success. And I think the second phase of that is instilling that into the staff that you've inherited. We had a real focus on making sure that kids had a pathway to success. And so, one of the things specifically when we talk about building trust is one of the interventions we did at the freshman academy that we brought to the high school and scaled was what we call our Friday school intervention.
Okay.
And so what that looks like is on Monday of that week, we'll give all the kids between a 50 and a 60, not the kids with a 30 or a 20, but those low hanging fruit kids between a 50 and a 60 on the Monday before the last Friday before the end of the semester is when we do Friday school. And so we'll give them a ticket to Friday school and we'll tell them you have 3 to 5 assignments that you have to make up before Friday. And if you don't have it made up before Friday, then you'll attend Friday school after school for 2 hours on Friday afternoon to try to get you to a passing grade. And so, trying to get the teachers to buy into this mentality of like, let's find a way to get a kid to be successful instead of finding a way to fail kids. And I feel like, not too long ago, it was a badge of honor for teachers to say, oh, yeah, I've got 12 kids failing my class. Well, I've got 17. Well, I'm failing 21 kids that can't pass my class. And it felt like, a couple decades ago, it was a badge of honor. And now, in Oklahoma, we have a pretty high trauma rate here. And since COVID in particular, the performance has declined. And so I think that, we're going to have to find ways to give kids hope. And I think that's a real powerful, measurable tool that we try to do here. And so, that intervention in particular, the teachers thought, oh, we'll have 15 kids show up on Friday. We'll have 17 kids show up on Friday. Well, we had over 200 kids get their grade up to passing by Friday, and we had 140 show up here on Friday. And so I think just trying to have that rookie mentality of, I'm so naive enough, Will, that I think we can accomplish anything, that we can do anything. And that rookie mentality of, we can do anything is so powerful because you get into some of that, the veterans, sometimes, that's the way it used to be. That's how it's always been done. So we can't do that here, or we can't change that here. And I think if you have a rookie mentality, you don't know what the old ways were. This is the way we're going to do it now, and let's get it done. And so I think that you got to get your current staff on board, and that takes time. You have to get to know them on a deep level, spend time with them. I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but having lunch with your staff as much as you can. I booked lunch every day in the first semester. I booked lunch every day with a different team. 10th grade math on Monday, 11th grade math on Tuesday, 12th grade math on Wednesday, English, science, history, business, foreign language, our English learner teachers, our counseling team, our college and career center. And so that took a big chunk of my time every day in the first semester. I was going home pretty late at night because I was neglecting some of those office things. And I certainly cut back in the second semester. But initially, you talk about the transition. Initially, you have to get to know your teachers on a deeper level. And I think that's the key.
Wow. Okay. I want to come back to that. But before I do, I just want to just circle back to something you said earlier about your Friday school intervention, which is just one of the nitty gritties that you guys did. I also know, Beau, because I know you, that you are a data hound. And so you're constantly looking at your numbers. You're constantly running reports. You're constantly looking at grades, which kudos to you, because you and I both know that if we're not studying the target, then we're probably not going to be hitting it. And so you're not just studying the target, but you've invited your teachers to study the target. And just in that one example, you talk your staff into scheduling this Friday after school intervention time. You target 200 kids that are currently failing a course or more. 140 of them end up showing up for those services. So really, you're only talking about 5 or 6% of your total population that's struggling with that credit recovery. And yet, of that 200, I mean, that's such a significant number of kids that show up there. I mean, more than 70% of those kids failing showed up to get the help they needed to advance on. And so it all matters. You could take this with a size school of 3,500 like yours, or a size school with 200 kids. And these practices that I'm asking you to rehearse with me are so significant because you are studying the data, you're responding to it with your team. And then I want to come back to what you said about teachers. You spent that first semester just pouring into relationship building every single day, eating with a different team so that you could get to know them. I also know, though, that you didn't do this without challenges. So let's talk about that. As you took over this new role, what were some of the challenges you had facing in that new setting and establishing some of the priorities you had for you and your team?
Yeah, I think teacher recruitment and teacher retention were the two things that I was told when I was being assigned here was these are the two areas that we need to improve there. And so I think the first thing that I wanted to, like I said, was start establishing those relationships. But the other thing is like those are obvious problems, but what are the problems within the building, like that not just the district sees? And so the first issue is you have to find out what your issues are. And so we had a leadership retreat my first summer, summer of 24, and I asked them to do a Shark Tank activity where they would group up into groups of four. Our leadership team, our teacher leadership team is I think there's 23 of them. So they grouped into groups of 3, 4, and 5, and I had them present to me the issues that they felt like were occurring at the high school, and then a possible solution or an idea to pitch to me. So not only was I able to quickly in this transition, quickly figure out what were the issues that they saw, and then also what were some of the ideas they had. And actually, one of them was getting to know the principal and having lunch with them. And so I had already planned on doing that, but when I heard that, I was like, okay, this is in my wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
I think the other challenge that I had to overcome was just the volume and the size. When you're at a smaller school, and I say smaller, the freshman academy still has 1,200 kids and 75 teachers, but to me, and now it feels very small. But it's easy for you to say like, oh, I'll just do that myself. I'll plan schedule pickup, the process myself. I'll plan the spring enrollment conferences. I can do that myself. And all of these things, you just think to yourself, well, if you want it done the way you want it done, you just do it yourself. And that is just not the case here. It is a situation where you have to learn to trust other people and honestly sometimes just get out of their way. If you give them a job, then don't go behind them and micromanage their process and their progress, and just let them do their work, and learning what their strengths are. So I think learning to work as a bigger admin team. I mentioned this earlier, learning those sacred cows, and some of them I knew from when I taught here, because I taught here when I first came to Union. But then there are certain teachers that there are certain things important to them. And so I think over time you have to learn what those are. Other than that, just really trying to establish trust in those teachers, even the ones that saw me as a teacher and a coach. When I first came here, I was some young teacher, some young coach, and a lot of those teachers, and when I came back, they probably still viewed me as that young teacher and coach from 7 years prior. And so I think really trying to establish a level of trust with some of those veteran teachers was also a big deal.
No, I think that's so important. I want to come back to something you said earlier too, Beau, which was your Shark Tank idea. I'm already writing that down because I'm going to start using that. That's what a brilliant way to invite people in to problem solving, but in a way that can be interactive and fun and collaborative. But for you, here you are sitting on the other side going, I'm taking notes because I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. So here, so kudos for giving credit to others, because as you said, trusting other people to help you do the things that there's no way you can do by yourself. And that's not just for principals in large schools. I think that's for every person as well. But when you think about your because I know this is important to you too. And we talked a little bit about this in the episode that we did like more than a year ago. And by the way, if anyone wants to go back and listen to our original conversation from 2024, it was episode 391. So if you want to go way back in the archive, you can. But I do want to sit here for a moment because one of your strengths also is teacher retention. And so what are some things that you brought with you from those past experiences, but lessons you gained in this new experience about trying to build and retain a really quality staff?
Yeah. So again, I think the most important thing that we do is hiring. And I think a lot of this starts at the hiring table. My first year here, taking over last summer, they suffered what I would say is an effective teacher loss. So I think I ended up hiring 43 teachers my first year. I would say 24 of those were effective teacher losses. They left the high school. They were effective. We would not have wanted to replace them. They were tenured. And so there was 24. And then this year was just 15. And so that's a 37.5% decrease. And I think when you continue to hire, and I don't want to say my people, but people that that signed up to work for me at the interview table because they know my heart, my passion. I think that's a big part of getting retention is having your people with the right mentality. Um, we're honest with them too about, sometimes there's challenges in an increasingly, I would say, inner city school with increasing low socioeconomic status and increasing diversity. There are easier schools, and I'm upfront with that at the interview table. There are private schools that will hire you that may be easier, but you're not going to find a place that where you can make a difference in a kid's life. When a young lady brings you a Mother's Day bracelet, or when they bring you a bouquet of flowers on Mother's Day, or when you remember their birthday and their parents forgot. There are some opportunities here in a school like ours where you can just truly make a difference. And you know, investing in those relationships with the teachers and getting to know them. We have a chart. Our administrative team, we have a chart where we have every staff member in it. And we have a tier 1 relationship, a tier 2 relationship, and a tier 3 relationship with those teachers. And we put our name next to those teachers if we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And we try to track, hey, this teacher doesn't have a relationship with any administrator. And there's 10 of us. We have a 10-person administrative team. And then we have a teacher leader specialist that is a former National Teacher of the Year, Rebecca Peterson, and she's on our team as well. So she also has access to this document. And the 11 of us, we go through there and we put our names next to the teachers we have good, strong relationships with, and ones that we don't that we can focus on. And then out to the side of this, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, where we label them, we have what I call the positive touch point tracker. And so I give shout outs every week in my weekly update. I'll take pictures from classrooms from different teachers and I'll put them in there, or this sports team or this fine arts crew here. And I'll celebrate them, and I'll have 10 or 12 shout outs in every weekly update, and I'll log those. And then when we write thank you cards to teachers, we'll log those. You mentioned earlier that we watch the data closely. Well, every other Monday, the administrative staff, we meet together and we track the trend line on our Fs. So each teacher, if they decrease by 8 Fs over the last 2 weeks, we're going to send them an email. Hey, I noticed that you have decreased your F list by 8 students over the last 2 weeks. And this is a huge deal to our kids, and it gives them true hope and a true future. And your work, it doesn't go unnoticed. We appreciate you. And I think just letting them know, because then when they go to the lunch table, they're going to talk. Hey, Mr. Brannon sent me an email, and he told me that he was proud of me for getting 8 kids off my F list. And then over there in the English lounge, they say, yeah, one of my assistant principals emailed me. I got 13 kids off the F list, and they recognize me. And so, we're logging thank you cards. We're sending those emails. We're doing the shout outs. We're buying donuts at faculty meetings. We do lots of fun things throughout the year that we try to really build culture, cookouts, fundraisers, and just really pouring into them. And then the last thing on our chart is the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the positive touch point tracker. The last thing is just a notes section. And so in that notes section, if it's a teacher that you work closely with and you find out that they're a new grandfather and their grandson's name is Wyatt, and you put that down, and the next time you see them, you say, hey, how's Wyatt? And they just look at you like, how did you remember my new grandson's name? You log those things. And when you have lunch with those teams every single day, you get to know them on a deeper level. And I promise you, if I find out that you like the Thunder, or that you want to golf, or that you like running, then every time I see you, I can ask you about those things. And so it's intentional. You can sit in your office all day and you can crunch numbers, but you can get out there in the hallways and you can get to know people. And that's what's key.
Oh my gosh, Beau, I want anyone listening to this right now to just push pause, rewind it 2 minutes, listen all over again. And then if you have never taken the opportunity to study your teachers like a great teacher studies their kids, that's what Beau was just describing. And Beau, I know you and I have talked about this before as your SOS system that because not only do you track students that need to be connected to meaningful relationships with teachers, but you guys do this for your teachers. And I know I'm at the risk of repeating myself, in a large school with an admin team of 10 people and probably 250 staff teacher combined, you're talking about in 3,500 kids. This is a huge community that you're trying to serve, but you've done it strategically. And those wraparound services that you're providing for your people, those shout outs that you're giving them, those trend lines that you're studying, the feedback that you're providing for them, making sure that you're also, every person is getting touched personally. All of that is intentional. And so when we come back to the numbers that you look at, where this year you had to replace 15 of those teacher spots versus the previous year that was so much more. In a school your size, that's a pretty small number when you think about percentage wise in terms of teacher turnover. Anything else you want to say about that before we move forward?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's just it takes effort and it takes intentionality.
Well, I love that. And I'm just going to say this too before I forget. At the end of the show, I'll share your contact information. But anyone who would love to reach out to Beau to learn more about his systems, how they do their tier one, tier two, tier three for teachers, any of that. I know Beau is so generous. And so I'll share his contact information at the end. And if you ever want to jump in a conversation with him or see samples of these things, you can. But I want to talk about your team. You've said this to me before. In fact, I was looking back at the last notes we had from a lunch, and I had written down too big to do alone. Talk to me about why that is such an important lesson that you pulled from this last year.
Well, I would say that that was a hard lesson to probably learn, but a lesson that was learned quickly. It did not take me long to figure it out. So, I think it starts with knowing your team and knowing what their strengths are and how best to allocate different responsibilities and different things. So, you know, um, I've got an assistant principal who's really passionate about graphic design and Canva and building culture and leadership. And I have an assistant principal who is passionate about developing new teachers, and I have her lead a new teachers meeting every month. That's another way we support and try to retain teachers, by the way. And she's really strong with literacy and professional development. And so she'll try to put together our PD days and take the lead on those things. And then I have another assistant principal who really doesn't want anything to do with leading a literacy strategy. He's a former coach and he's Mr. Fix It. Instead of a teacher emailing a building engineer or a custodian, if he can change a ceiling tile or move a desk in or out, then he's going to do it. And I've got another that's really, I would say, gifted in her logistics and her details. And so she coordinates 3,500 kids picking up their schedules and how that's going to flow in this 1,000,000 square foot building that we have, and where they're going to pick up what and where they're going to pick up this or that. I have another guy who is the Tulsa Oilers announcer, and he is the hype man. He's got a voice made for the PA, and he's in charge of our student life and our pep rallies and our senior assemblies and our prom and dances, and like that's right in his wheelhouse. And I've got one that's a former counselor, so she's going to be right beside me in the master schedule, and she knows sped inside and out. And Mr. Shagwell here, he's a union legend. He's my associate principal. He's the best PR guy you can find. If somebody wants an interview, if there's an upset parent, they go through Mr. Shagwell and they come out there happy as can be. We just have so many different talented team members, and you can't put people in places to be successful if you don't know what their strengths are. And I've got another that's really tracking our non-grads. He could tell you almost up to the minute how many non-grads we have right now. I could text him and say, hey, how many non-grads are we down to? And he knows who's left and what they have. And so you just got to know exactly what they're good at and utilize those strengths and lean into those strengths, and sometimes just get out of their way. Sometimes I find myself, I give them something and then I start meddling around in their work, and I'm just like, okay, you've got this. I'm just going to get out of here and go back to what I'm supposed to be working on. We actually just did a Clifton's Strengths Finders from Gallup. And you can take a big poll and learn what your top 5 strengths are. And so we actually just did that last Thursday as a leadership team with our leadership teachers. And so I think leaning on those strengths and understanding your team is something that certainly I learned quickly. And Will too. Let me just add that this is going to help all these guys become better principals in one day. At the 9th grade now, we do very little testing I think we only did the pre-ACT for a few years, and then they did away with testing altogether in 9th grade. And I think that really put me behind the 8 ball as a principal, because I'd never really gone through the testing process, state testing, ACT, and all these assistant principals in our building, they all have a test that they're in charge of. And so that really just allows them, it's going to prepare them to be better principals too.
Man, Beau, so much there. So when you think about that team that you have, and this is just your leadership team, and I know you could do the same thing because I know you know your people. You could go through the same thing with your teacher leaders. You could go through the same thing with your staff. I'm guarantee you already know students among your population that could also bring leadership to their fellow students. But there's something really, and I don't want to say this to anybody to ever give you the idea that it's easy, because it's not. Um, But there is something beautiful about having a team of people who you can trust and everyone knows their roles. And they do them so well that I don't know about you, Bo, but sometimes the best time of the year for principals after school has started. Like this, like getting ready for school to start can be the most stressful time because your whole team's not there. But once that first day begins and everybody's back doing their thing, it there's just something so wonderful about walking through a campus and watching everybody do their thing and when they do it well. And so, kudos, friend, for recognizing the strengths of your people and leveraging those as well. Anything else you want to add to that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there once again. So it's funny you say that after the first couple weeks of school, it's almost eerie to just walk around and see the magic happening and the flow happening. It's before the evaluations start, but it's after you've kind of gotten the first day of school over with. There's like this odd like 3 or 4 week stretch where you're like, what should I do with my hands right now? And I have nothing like I need to go out in the hallways and just walk around and just observe the masterpiece.
Well, let's talk to that leader who um, maybe facing their own transition, Bo. And I know these lessons change for all of us over time, but I want you to share what's currently on your mind when it comes to just advice or thoughts that you would want to give a leader as he or she is stepping into their own transition.
Yeah, I think it's cliche to say, but I think that it's true. You have to take care of yourself. I get into a routine every morning, and I'm sure it looks different for everyone, but I get up and do a Bible devotion and go for a run and maybe lift some weights, and that's my time. And if I don't get that done throughout the day, my anxiety level is much higher throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I would say is to understand and remember that it's never as good as it seems, and it's never as bad as it seems. It's probably somewhere in the middle. It's never as bad as you think it is. A week later, it won't feel nearly as bad as it did. And earlier I mentioned this too. Have a rookie mentality and just think that you can accomplish anything. Don't go in there with any preconceived notions. Like just keep that rookie mentality. John Gordon talks about that a lot. If you want to look into his books and audio podcasts that I listen to a lot. And then a quote that our former superintendent said one time that has really stuck with me. He said, "You're not as important as you think you are, but you're a lot more important than you think you are." And I think that speaks to the culture that you can build as a leader of a building, but it also speaks to the fact that never think that you're irreplaceable, because I could be replaced by Monday. If something happened to me, I'm replaced by Monday, no problem, and this school is going to keep functioning. But you also need to remember that you are the only dad that your kids have. Mm-hmm. And God willing, I'm the only husband my wife ever has. And, there's going to be principals that come in and out of this building. And so remember, who you are, what your priorities are, and what your purpose is. And just remember, you don't have to be on a mission trip to be on a mission. And this is our mission field every day. And go find teachers with that same mindset. I told our teachers a year ago when I first came here, the first speech that I kind of gave them, I said, "Listen, you guys are the heroes. This building called education is on fire, and when there's a fire in a building, the people are fleeing; they're running from it. And then there's a group of firemen that are running into the fire, and they are the heroes." And I said, the world of education is on fire, and people are running from it, and you guys are running into it every day, and you guys are my heroes. And just please keep remembering that. So find some teachers that want to be the heroes, and let's go get it done.
Bo, thank you for all of that. And as we wrap up, I want you to be able to give people your contact information. But before you do, I just want to say a couple of things, because I get to live in this community and because I get to see you on occasion and run into people you work with or run into parents whose kids you serve. There is something really satisfying for me to hear you talked about when you're not in the room. And so I'm just saying this not just for you, but for the people that are listening too. Sometimes I think we forget to adapt that mindset of what will someone be saying about me at dinner that night, or saying about me when they're talking to their spouse, or saying about me when they're talking to their parents. And it's not so that you become overwhelmed with your self-image, because you already said this. You are more important than you think you are, and you're not as important as you think you are. But it is important to recognize that you have a difference to make in the story that people are telling about you. And so, Beau, when I hear people talking about your school, and whether that's teachers I run into or our community members, they recognize the good things happening, but they also recognize the strength of your leadership. And that's not just yours, it's a collective thing, but it does make a difference. And so for anyone listening today that you're wondering in your own leadership, man, is it making a difference? It is. And the stories that people are going to be telling about you are often the ones you never hear. But when you adapt that kind of mentality that Beau's talking about, it's inevitable that you're going to be making the difference in the lives of others. So, Beau, as we wrap up, how can our listeners stay connected with you, and any other comments that you want to make before we say goodbye?
Yeah, so I'm not super active on Twitter or X, but it's Beau, BEAU _Brannon, BRANNON. Happy to connect there. Probably a little more active on LinkedIn. It's just Beau Brannon, and I'm pretty easy to find.
Well, we will put the contact information in our show notes for any listeners that want to reach out to you. And I just also have to say what I said earlier to people too. If you're listening to any of this conversation and you're like, man, Beau, I need to see some of these samples. I'd love to get in a room with you. I'd love to collaborate and love to talk. Then don't hesitate to reach out to Beau through social media. We'll also put a link to your school's website in there, Beau, so folks can find you at Tulsa Union. And Principal Matters listeners, I just want to say as we're wrapping up, you may be in a transition, you may not be. By the time you're listening to this episode, we'll be well into second semester. But I think every single day you wake up, you have the opportunity to make a difference in a new season, because every day is a fresh new day. And so don't wait for the beginning of a new semester or the beginning of a new year to decide that you can do something today. Well, even if it's just one thing from today's conversation that inspired you, do the one thing to build that relationship or build those connections. So Beau, thank you so much for the opportunity to learn from you. Thanks for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.